Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I am Death's Design. Welcome back.
You are the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
Patrick, we are back with our franchise review for 2025. Continuing on with Final Destination 2 this week.
Oh, yes, Damon. Final Destination 2 with quite the cast. My gosh, so hold your horses here. Of course, the late, great Tony Todd reprises his role as Mr. Bloodworth. We have Justina Machado as Isabella, Terrence T.C. Carson as Eugene, Jonathan Cherry as Royer, Keegan Connor Tracy as Kat, Rory, not Royer, Linda Boyd as Nora, James Kirk as Tim, David Patcow as Evan, Michael Landis as Officer Burke, AJ Cook as Kimberly, and yes, Damon, the returning champ Allie Larder, back as Clear Rivers, the most 2000s name of all time. Mind you, written by J. Mackie Gruber, Eric Bess, and of course Jeffrey Reddick, with directing by David R. Ellis, a budget of $26 million and a gross worldwide of $90 million, Damon. Not too shabby.
Clear Rivers, did they just decide to make the female version of Muddy Waters? Was that kind of like the plan, I guess?
I guess that was the plan. Like, oh, what's the opposite of Muddy Waters? Clear Rivers. Okay.
There you go. So yes, Patrick, we are talking Final Destination 2 this week. We are continuing our franchise review. And by the end of the episode, we'll also have a little special surprise for you guys coming soon. We'll talk about towards the end of the episode. But yes, Final Destination 2 came out a couple years after the original film. And as we know in horror, you can't have a successful first film without there wanting to be a second film. Only in the rarest of instances in these days do you get like a Get Out where there's never a sequel. And I'm sure someone approached Jordan Peele like, do you have an idea for a Get Out 2?
Hell yeah.
That's just how this works. So once Final Destination became a phenomenon, there was no way they were not going to make Final Destination 2. And as we know, there's many more.
Many more in the franchise, and this is actually where my knowledge of the franchise ends. I never saw anything past Final Destination 2, at least in full. I know I went to go see this in the theater. It was very, very memorable kind of theater experience for this one. Did you go see this in the theater?
I did not, and I remember at the time, this was like right in college age, so I didn't go to the movies as much during this time, but I do remember in my own little rebellious way, Patrick, I didn't go to this in the theater because I was pissed off that Devon Sawa wasn't in it. I was like, how are you going to, because I saw Allie Larder was in it, and I was like, hold on, how are you going to make a sequel without Devon Sawa? And I was like, that kind of pissed me off. And so I rebelled by not going to see this in the theater.
I love that. Hey, listen, I'm always going to stand up for our boy Devon Sawa, so I do appreciate that. I didn't know at the time that I wasn't going to get a Devon Sawa in this movie, or I may have rioted. By the way, how about that unceremonious way that they, without jumping all the way into the movie right away, but like they basically just write him off on a web page, which is such a 2000s thing to do. It's like they kind of mention it in like a little police report, but then it's like Officer Burke like really finds out when he reads on a web page that he was hit by a stray brick, and you're like, oh geez, what a great way to send off an awesome character.
I know there were like, I don't want to get too far off topic, but let's just go ahead and talk about the Devon Sawa of it all, because like when they decided to continue the story, and obviously Allie Larder does come back as Clear Rivers, there's lots of conflicting reports out there about why Devon Sawa didn't come back. There's rumors that it was a contract dispute, pay dispute, which again, we understand how that goes. There was also reports that it was a timing issue. He had other projects going on. He couldn't do it. I'm not going to get into the details or try to figure out between the two of us which is the real story. As I've said on the show before, Devon is a buddy of mine. Maybe one day we'll get him on the show and I'll ask him that very question, and maybe he'll tell us the real inside scoop. But that being said, I will say Final Destination is a strong sequel. I think most people love this film, and there's a contingency of fans who actually like this better than the original. I think I mentioned that in our last episode of Final Destination. There's a group of people who like Final Destination 2 more than the original Final Destination. I certainly don't fault them that. I will say, though, the way they dealt with Devon Sawa not coming back, and I'm not, listen, I like Allie Larder very much, and I have no problem that they decide to bring her back. But once Devon is out, and that's the way you do it, you're like, we're gonna put on a webpage that he died by a falling brick of all things. And if you read the caption on the news story, it says he hadn't left the house in like 3 months or something like that, and he walked outside and the brick just fell on him. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
That makes me lean towards the contract dispute version because they're just like, here's a big middle finger to you, Devin Sawa, for not doing our movie. Of all the issues, like, I don't really, again, I'm not disagreeing that this is a fun sequel. It is a fun sequel, and we'll talk about all the reasons why. But I will say if there is one big disappointment, if you're going to do a sort of continuation of the story, it's not totally a continuation of the story, but it sort of is. Doing Devin Sawa that way is kind of dirty. I would say that's like my least favorite part of this film.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, hindsight's 2020. It could have been like right now. I'd go. You know what I would have suggested is like say he has gone missing, like we don't know where he is, and then always leave that open, so that way the return of Devin Sawa could happen at any point. And like, I guess at the time that's not how Hollywood played ball. They were just like, oh, write him off just some way. Like somebody somewhere did that. I'm not going to claim who did what or for what and why, because I really don't know. But I will say that like there were better ways to do what they did. It felt so tacked on. And I was like, oh, this is like almost a sign of what's to come. It's like I don't want to say it felt lazy, but it did. Just the way you got rid of him felt incredibly lazy. Why they did it, I don't know. Maybe we'll get clarity on that. I mean, if I have it my way, we'll get clarity from all sides if we can get it from all sides. We'll work on that for you guys during this franchise review. But Damon, the story of Final Destination 2 is actually very closely tied to the original story. This was something I didn't really remember. And like, it's been a while since I've revisited this movie. Because everybody knows the setup for Final Destination 2, which is a girl has this vision. She's about to get on the on-ramp of this expressway, and holy shit, the pile up from hell comes to her in a vision, Damon. And it's insanity. And I remember it so vividly, rewatching it again for this podcast. That pile up is even better than I remember it. And I remember it to be great. And I'm like, this? I mean, man, we're talking 2000, what again? 2003? For 2003, very well done. I mean, you know, like just on the edge, like they could have overdone it with some of the CG in those moments, like the people on fire and stuff like that. They really managed somehow to make that one of the more effective openers of any movie. And I will argue, and maybe this is why a lot of people like this movie over the first one, this is more shocking, more intense than the original Final Destination, like vision, you know, that kind of kicks off the movie. What say you, Damon Martin?
So, like, I'll say this. The original is more shocking only because you don't know it's coming, unless you just totally got spoilers. But that being said, the opening in Final Destination when the plane goes up, or when Alex has the vision of the plane going up, it is a pretty intense scene with the fire and exploding and the people getting sucked out of the plane. It is pretty intense, but it's over in about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. I don't know how long it is. It's not that long. This scene feels like it goes on for like 10 minutes and it's all intense. Like this is a better opening is what I'm saying. Like I love the opening of the original Final Destination, but this one is more intense. And I think just like you would hope they would do with a sequel, is they're like, people really like that plane sequence. Let's just, inject some adrenaline and jack up some steroids and let's do an even bigger one. And so that's what they did. This crash scene on the highway is insane. And again, maybe it's 5 minutes. I didn't time it. I just watched it again the other night. I didn't time it. But it feels, and when I say it goes on, I'm not saying that in a bad way, like it drags. I'm saying like it's just so intense. It feels like it's 10 minutes of just pure chaos. And in a way, I love it because I think they saw the reaction of the original and they're like, people love that scene. Let's just do 10 minutes of that and make it even crazier. And it works.
What I really love about this scene was something that I completely forgot. So the scene takes place, and then all of a sudden, Kim kind of shakes awake, and she's freaking out, and her friends are like, "What? You need to go! Like you're holding up the line here. You're holding up all these people." And she's like, "We can't. Like, I see this vision. It's gonna happen. Whatever. Like, Highway to Hell is gonna come on the radio. I just know it." And then it comes on the radio, and they're like, "Oh, that's fucking weird." And then she blocks the on ramp, and she stops. She tries to stop this disaster from happening. And she does. And then this police officer behind her, Officer Burke, comes up and he's like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you blocking all the traffic?" And then right in that moment, the pileup begins. And you're like, "Oh, I guess she was right." But this is the stamp that I love, Damon. I had completely forgotten that second semi truck plows into her friends and just wipes them off the map.
I am so glad you said that because I said on the last show, I've seen Final Destination, the original one, like probably 50 times, maybe more. I love that film. It's one of my all-time favorite films. I'm kind of like you. I've seen I've seen bits and pieces of the other Final Destinations, but if you were like, do you remember the opening scene in part 3, part 4? I would be like, I don't remember. I know one's got a roller coaster in it. I can't remember what.
Right, I know there's a roller coaster. Yeah, but I know I never seen it.
And I know I've definitely seen Final Destination 2 more than I mean, I've seen this one all the way through multiple times. Maybe 3 times now, maybe 4 times with this latest viewing. After that, we're going to be going into largely fresh territory because I know I've seen 3. I think I've seen most of 4, but again, there's just no memory of it really in my head right now. The reason I'm saying that is I know I've seen part 2 multiple times. I completely forgot that it wipes out her friends. I swear to God, I was like, did I just not watch this movie before? Because when the truck comes in, it just plows away her SUV and all her friends die. I was like, I remember them being in the car. I remember the one guy smoking weed. I remember the highway to hell. And I remember her friend making the joke with her dad, like, we're going to get laid or whatever. I remember all that. But I've just completely blocked out that they just get completely wiped out in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
It's just a perfect exclamation point and a like subversion of the expectations. Like, so, I'm kind of trying to take myself back to my first viewing because it certainly felt like that in that moment. I was like, holy shit, I didn't see that coming. I knew what was coming. She's going to have this vision, that she's going to wake up, and then the thing is actually going to happen. And then we're going to like, oh, that was weird. But I just forgot about that little exclamation point, which is all the friends that were with her that you would have assumed survive with her get taken out. And it's insane. And the people that she delayed in that on-ramp, they become part of her story. They're complete strangers. I like that way in. This is a different way in. So credit to the writers who came up with that idea of like, oh, like, yeah, the first time we did that was like all friends or like classmates. So they all had a reason to be together. This is like, no, I have to force these people to get together to try and stop Death's Design this time. It was just a completely new way in.
I actually really appreciate that too, because I think, again, it subverts, as you said, subverts expectations because you just assume she has this premonition. Her friends are going to be the first people she saves. I mean, she's in the car with them, for Christ's sake. And the fact that they get completely wiped out and then the people that she does end up saving have absolutely no connection to her whatsoever. Like, she doesn't know any of these people. The cop, the guy in the Trans Am, the mother, the girl having a baby, none of them. She doesn't know any of them. So I kind of appreciated that. And because once the story gets kicking off and she starts believing in the whole, Death's Design and things are happening, she has to like seek these people out because these are not her classmates. This is not her teacher from high school like it was in the first one.
Not even everybody was pulled in by the cops. Like some of those people just drove off.
Yeah, so I like that they added that little wrinkle there that this was totally random and these people were random. These weren't even people she knew. So I like that wrinkle because it is again, when you read interviews with this second film and Jeffrey Reddick, who came up with the story, who created the story for the first one, a big part of it was he didn't want to just do another Final Destination. He wanted to continue the mythology. The way you continue the mythology is you add new wrinkles. And I know that this doesn't go to the whole Death's Design thing, but when you wipe out her friends in the first 10 minutes, you've changed everything because there's no Todd. Even Carter, like he was an asshole, but they went to school together. They knew each other. His favorite teacher. She doesn't know any of these people.
Yeah, and I say this and I feel a little bit shitty because I don't want to shit on the actors that were in that car with her. But I was like, boy, these don't feel like supporting characters in a movie. They felt really like flat You know, like I was like, they feel very disposable, like in a really weird way. And then I was like, oh, that's why. And it makes total sense. Like these characters aren't going to matter for the rest of the movie. They're going to get wiped out completely. And I was like, sucks for those actors, like, cause they weren't thinking about that. You know, they're just like, oh, cool, I get cast in this role. And they're like, yeah, you're just fodder. You're just fodder for this movie. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about looking extra put together or anything like that. It won't matter past the first 10 minutes.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this, Patrick, because I was again when I was reading and doing research for this movie, and as I said, Jeffrey Reddick came up with the story for this, and he had said that he didn't want to just do Final Destination 2 is basically like another Final Destination. Like it all starts over again. He wanted to connect them and he wanted to have some connective tissue, which again was why they wanted to bring back Devon Sawa and they wanted to bring back Ali Larter, but they also wanted to expand on the mythology. Now, some of this I know I've seen this movie before, but I feel like I forgot some of this. So just to kind of get in like the plot, and again, we're in full spoilers. This movie's 22 years old at this point. So the whole connection is it's 1 year after Flight 180, and Kimberly is watching like a news report about it, and she knows she knows the story. Then she has the premonition. Now, when you meet Clear Rivers, we'll get into her story in a little bit, but basically what they kind of find out is that a lot of the people involved in this mysterious crash, or the people who got saved, actually had connections to Flight 180. Like the cop, like he was supposed to go on a call where him and his partner actually ends up getting killed. He ends up going to take care of the Billy Hitchcock thing, which was Sean William Scott's character who got beheaded. And somebody else was like, the one guy was a substitute teacher, and he went to replace Miss Luton, who died in a house fire. So like they all had these weird connections to the first. Did that work for you, Patrick? Because I was like, sometimes like there's a good and a bad about that. When you go to me, it almost felt like they went a little too far. Like everybody has a connection to this.
There is a sense of that this plot's a little more convoluted, but I'm going to give them credit because they did something. There's a step we skipped here, which is what they discover as they're trying to unravel the mystery. Right? They kind of get back into the same mechanics of the first Final Destination, but what they're figuring out is for some reason these deaths are happening backwards, like opposite the design, and they're like, why? Like they don't know why. So they do pose a question to you, which I was like, oh, okay. Like, and I was on that mystery. I was like, yeah, why is it happening backwards? And that felt in the moment like I was like, this is like, okay, are we just making it backwards to be backwards? Like I didn't quite understand. I was like, what does that even matter to this? Why we're going backwards? Well, we're going backwards because indeed death was the events of the first Final Destination created a ripple where all these people that were now saved from this pileup were actually supposed to be killed in the events after Final Destination. All the ripple effect saved all those people. And so death is coming for them in the order that they were supposed to happen, which is in this backwards order from what's going on. It kind of threw off our main characters who thought they understood death's design. And it's like, no, death is like still trying to clean up the pieces from Final Destination 1. So I was like, okay, that actually makes sense. It's a lot of words, Damon. I just had to say a lot of words to make that make sense. But it still does make sense in this world, in this logic that they're coming up with. So I was like, okay, I'll give you guys credit for that. It makes sense. Here's something that I didn't remember, Damon, and I'd like to pose that question to you. We do eventually get to our scene where basically Kim goes to hunt down Clear because she's like, well, Clear is the only person who went through this before, and she's the only person who will believe me, so I need to go find her. And sure enough, she finds her in a padded cell. They get into a weird, convoluted argument that is totally 2000s, where everybody just got a lot of attitude and you don't really understand why. And then eventually Clear is like, fine, I'll join up with you guys. And then they go hunt down Bloodworth, because Bloodworth is this all-knowing kind of, basically they have resigned to the idea that he is somehow connected to death because he's a mortuary guy. Which yeah, he's a mortician, and they're just like, oh, well, clearly he knows about death, and it's the great Tony Todd, so he puts on this very theatrical performance, and he explains to them, he goes, I think that, he knows that death's design can be messed up if a new life is brought into the mix, and it will stop it. And I was like, oh, okay, weird way in, but gotcha. Okay, new life. Well, someone in that pileup was pregnant. And if they would have gotten into that pileup, they would have died. So they decide, oh, the new life must have been that pregnant woman. They go on the search for the pregnant woman to find her and make sure she can have her baby before death comes for her. So I was like, I'm in. I'm totally in. Damon, I was like way in, even though I was like, it's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts here. But she has the baby. They successfully get that part going. And what Kim ultimately realizes is that the new life was Kim's own life because she was supposed to die and then she needs to like be brought back to start a new life. And I was like, guys, you went one step too far. The baby part to me totally worked. 100% worked. And I was like, you're into it. I understand the idea, Damon, that they are wanting to subvert the expectations. Like you get to the false victory. The false victory is the baby lives, and we did it. We did it. We beat Death's Design. No, you didn't. It's Kim. But I was like, but also that rule set doesn't really apply here. I don't know, Damon. What do you think? I thought that was the most convoluted part.
So real quick, let me just I don't want to go back too far, but just talk about like the idea of the connection between the first one and the second one, the characters are going in reverse. I did like that. Again, I just felt like some of the circumstances were getting a little ridiculous. Like we're going a little too far with some like everybody, and they all just happen to be in the same line of cars on the highway. I get it. It's a movie. They got to have that in there. I understand it, but it's almost like a couple of them, sure, maybe not every single person in the line of cars had a connection, but again, it's not too bad. But I agree. So going to Bloodworth, and he says the only way to stop death is with new life. Okay, well, you just add a new wrinkle into the whole Death's Design. And as we said, part of the premise of this movie is they didn't want to just rehash the first one. They wanted to add more mythology. I'm like, okay, I'm with you. Now, again, part of the enjoyment of this movie that, as I said, that's different from the first one, is these people don't know each other. They really don't have a reason to care about each other. They're kind of forced to because they understand it's like a domino. One falls, then all of them start falling. So like, hey, if you die, then I die, then it's, so on down the line. But again, they don't really care for each other, so they have to find a bond to care. And when they introduce that wrinkle of new life subverts death's plan, we got to save this pregnant woman who didn't show up to the police station. She had no connection to anybody else in the crash. She was just there that day. Okay, I'm cool with all that. They have to play detective. Who is she? Where did she go? They have to go back to the police station and find the footage and the video, and then you find out that they go to have her picked up, and then her water breaks. And again, it's all making sense to lead us to this big conclusion of her having her baby. I was like, I'm there. That's okay. I mean, I'm not saying it makes perfect sense, but cool. It's a cool bit of mythology. But yeah, you went one step too far because the baby's born, and you're like, you broke Death's Design. You did it. Like a life that was not born yet, that was not in this world, is now out there, and you've kind of broken the cycle. I was like, that's kind of a cool little wrinkle. And then it didn't matter. So we just spent like 35 minutes caring about this woman and going through all the drama of getting to her and her in the car here in the van with the cop and all this madness. And it doesn't really matter. So you just, again, I'm fine with subverting expectations, but at least subvert expectations where because literally if you think about it, and I'm not saying, again, I like this movie, you kind of spent 35 minutes wasting our time because she never mattered.
I know that's what bums me out about that. I go, if this movie had turned into a road movie with the character, oh gosh, I know her name is Isabella, but what's the character's name? Oh no, Isabella is the character's name. Excuse me. Yeah. Like if they'd have found Isabella and most of the movie was a road trip trying to protect Isabella as she's in labor, like trying to deliver the baby, but they're also being, run down by death. I think it would have been good. What was weird is that they separated the groups. And like, so it was like Isabella was over here on a very much a B/C story. And I was supposed to care about Kim because that little turnaround would tell me, oh, okay, it all matters what Kim's going through. Kim is just busy trying to fix the problem. So when the subversion comes around, it's like, no, it's Kim's life that we should care about. I was like, But where was the thing that made me go, oh, like Kim's not spending the whole movie going, I should just end myself and end all this mad. If she was doing something like that, I'd be like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like, okay, I see. We need to actually save her because maybe she's got survivor's guilt or something. They didn't go that clever. They just went like, psych, it wasn't the baby, it was her all along. Why? Doesn't really matter. And I was like, like that didn't land for me. And if I was to do a rewrite of The Living Dead for that, what I would do is we would do the thing, same thing we did with Isabella, and for some reason things still aren't working. Then you find out Kim's pregnant. If you find out Kim's pregnant, that just rolls you right into the next movie. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like death's still coming for you. And at the very end, you find out she's pregnant. Cool. We'll go right into 3.
See, you just stole my idea, but I have a slightly different version. My version is this. Is obviously, I know they do this a year later. Don't make it a year later. Make it 6 weeks later, 2 months later, whatever it is. And again, let's play the theory of Devon Sawa's Alex has just gone missing. He's just like, we don't know where he's at. He's gone full Unabomber. Like, he's just living off in the fucking woods somewhere.
He's gone Hunter.
Yeah, he's gone Hunter, exactly. And then the twist is that Clear's pregnant with Alex's child. That's what we don't know, because 2 months later,
I like that. I love that.
You're still early enough in the pregnancy where she wouldn't really know she's pregnant, and then that's the big reveal, like she's sick, or you're like, uh-oh, she's having morning sickness, like, because again, you don't start showing for several months. I don't have kids, but
she doesn't even have morning sickness. Some women don't have it, right? Like that happens too.
So that's why I say you close down the story a little bit, so it's like 3 months later, 2 months later, and I mean you could make it a year later and just say that Alex just went missing. You know
exactly.
What I mean? Recently,
yes.
Whatever. However, the time. My point is the big mystery solved is that Clear is pregnant. She didn't know she was pregnant with Alex's child. That to me would be a much better twist, and that's how it ends. And Clear survives, and death's still coming for them. It doesn't stop what actually happens in the film. Everyone else still can die. It's trying to get back to the baby, and now we know, like, oh shit, now we've set ourselves up for Final Destination 3, where Clear is 9 months pregnant, about to give birth. Now we know that's what we have to do. So again, because Clear is such a, is the character who survives the first movie going to the second movie, make her matter more, because in the long run, while Clear actually does provide a role in this movie, like she actually does play a major part in this movie.
Yeah.
Her getting offed, and sorry, spoilers, she dies in this movie, feels kind of unsatisfying with the way it happened. You know what I mean? I think if you add that wrinkle into where she continues to survive, but mostly because she's pregnant with Alex's child, and also even if Devon Sawa never comes back and you just say he went into the woods and we have no idea where he is, you're still giving Alex a story because it's his kid. I'm just saying, I think that would have been a better out in this movie than Kimberly was the one, she needed new life. Like, didn't Alex get new life in the first one? Like, he got electrocuted and died. He died. Yeah. He did, like they said, his heart wasn't beating, but it didn't matter. It still came back around for him.
Yeah, I mean, I like either one of our ideas. I think your idea works if the studio knows they can lock Ali Larter down for a third movie. If they already know that, they're like, Ali, we need you in for a third movie, like minimum, and they pay her dollars and all that stuff. You go with Damon's ending. If she's like, I don't know, I'm kind of doing some TV now, I got some stuff going, then you go with the Kim ending where Kim's pregnant. Either one of those works.
We had the same idea, though.
We had the same idea. I like yours for like a proper franchise. I think yours works if we know we got Ali Larter. Because and then we did our rewrite of The Living Dead where Devon Sawa went missing and he could potentially come back for a third or a fourth or whatever. We have a franchise on our hands, basically, a very cohesive one. It's just a matter of like, obviously they were dealing with like, can we even lock our stars down? Not necessarily. So if they could, you go with Damon's ending. If they couldn't, you go with Patrick's ending. And both of them, but either way, both of those allow you to really invest in that turn, in that subversion. This subversion felt a little bit empty because honestly, Kim is just too busy figuring out the problem. And you don't really get to the heart of what's going on in her life or what's going on with her. She's just trying to bring everybody. She's an action star. She's Indiana Jones and she's looking for the Grail. That's what she's doing, and you're rooting for her 100%. But that ending where it was all about saving your life, Kim. It's like, what? Wait, was it? Like, it was about saving everybody's life. Like, that was the whole point, was to stop Death's design. Why is Kim's life extra special, is what it felt like.
And that's why I say, like, when you go back to the first one, if that is the way you subvert Death's design, and you do away with the way Death was dealing with you, Alex would have done that in the first film because he died. Mm-hmm. He got electrocuted. So wouldn't he have done the same exact thing because he wasn't supposed to live and they somehow save him? I mean, I'm currently watching an incredible show on Max called The Pit. It's a show about emergency room medicine. I'm full on obsessed with the show. And people are flatlining and they bring them back technically they are flatlined and they bring them back from the dead. That's what Alex did the first one, and so you're saying that's what Kimberly did. So it's kind of, again, it just feels empty. Again, I understand it's a horror movie. Logic kind of goes flying out the window sometimes. But yeah, it just felt like if you're going to introduce that idea of like new life stops death, again, I like that. I like that wrinkle.
I like it.
But to spend 35 minutes with Isabella and then find out she didn't matter at all and it was all about Kimberly, I'm like, hold on, what? Like, it's confusing.
And that would have been fine, Damon. Like, to be all about Kimberly if they had put something in that lead up that mattered, like I was saying earlier, if she was just like, well, I just want to die, I have survivor's guilt or whatever, and like Officer Burke was dragging her along in the mission or whatever, but they just didn't. Like, she was just too busy, like, it didn't land for me.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not a bad wrinkle to introduce that. And again, just like the first one, when Alex saves Clear and then they go to Paris together and you realize it's not over, and we talked about how much we loved that ending. I'm fine with the whole Isabella thing. She was the one bringing new life in, and when she has the baby, it still doesn't matter. Okay, but at least give me a satisfying conclusion to that, which is the new life stops death. Just making it Kimberly just feels kind of empty, and it's like almost like a cop-out in a way. I'm not saying I like this movie very much. Let me be clear about that. I do like this movie very much. But it's kind of like where I said, like, my biggest problem is the Devon Sawa, like, you're killing him off screen. At least, like, when you look at, like, Halloween 4, like, they killed Laurie Strode because at that point, like, Jamie Lee Curtis was not coming back for another Halloween at that point. She had moved on and done a lot of other things. And they're like, well, we're going to kill her off, but her story still kind of continues because her daughter, lives, and now Michael Myers is coming after her daughter. It's his niece. Again, it's a little convoluted, a little crazy, a little weird, whatever, but at least the Strode storyline, the Laurie Strode storyline technically still carries on. And that's the way you do it in this film. Like we said, again, now that's assuming Ali Larter wants to come back for a third film. And even if Devon Sawa never comes back, you're technically having Alex Browning's kid. But either way, your idea with Kimberly's kid, fine. Kimberly got pregnant. Now, again, you got to introduce a thread like who knocked her up. Like she never established she had a boyfriend or anything. And
she established she was horny. Her and her friend right off the top.
Yeah. So maybe but again, there's just really all you have to do is you just have to twist a few things to make that work. Like, you're not really changing a lot, to be honest. Like,
you're not. It's small, and I know what I suppose I know what the writers would say, which is, well, we gave Kim all those visions of her dying, like that's what works. And I go, yeah, it was misdirecting us the whole time. Like, we thought, we thought all the visions she was having of the car going into the lake and being choked by somebody, she thought, she was like, I'm having visions of my death. Those are the clues for us. But again, they were clues for her to solve a problem. They weren't clues for her to, like, I got to keep on living, man. I got to, because, and maybe they mess up by doing the Bloodworth scene where Bloodworth goes, a new life will stop Death's design. A life that was not supposed to happen can fix this. If they maybe wouldn't have mentioned that at all, I mean, that's literally a line. Tony Todd's in this movie for 4 minutes, if that. If they would have changed that line to something else, you don't even have this problem. We don't even have this discussion. But it's like that line sets off a series of events, which is very Final Destination-y, that led us to something that I just go, oh, that's You could have done something else with that. It didn't feel earned, I would say.
Yeah, it's not terrible, and in my opinion, the idea is right on. I dig the
Yes,
mythology.
I love the idea.
I just don't love the execution in this particular. Again, even if it had been Isabella, I would have been like, all right, cool, like it's Isabella, like she had the baby.
Yes, I would have been totally fine with that.
You're not giving us the second twist or anything like that, but you did what you said you were going to do. Even that would have been fine. But then again, going back to Kimberly, it's just kind of a weird thing. Why her? Why not? Again, it's just like I said.
Yeah.
And then you could have flipped it. You could have flipped it in a lot of different ways and made it still work.
And then they do at the end. Credit to them to go, oh, like we got you one more time. They subvert us 2-3 times. Yeah. And I appreciate this. Again, I think I'm saying what you're saying. I like this movie. The final subversion is that Officer Burke, he doesn't know how to eat a skewer to save his life. So you don't have a boyfriend, you have a former boyfriend when you see how he tries to eat a skewer at a barbecue. 2, he didn't tell her that he saved the farm boy who was supposed to be plowed over by the truck during the chaotic moment near the end of the movie. So Death's design was reconfigured and they're back again. And we didn't even save Kim from the situation. I liked that little subversion that they put in there. Good job for this movie, honestly. In general, this movie kept me guessing. But it's weird how like tweaking one line of this movie could have changed everything. It could have changed every single thing in this movie. Or like you said, just go with Isabella was the answer. If Isabella was the answer, and then we got that subversion at the end where they're having their little barbecue, and you realize, oh shit, I did save somebody. I forgot to tell you I saved a kid while we were out there on this mission. So I did screw up Death's design. So no, we're right back in the shit. You could have worked that out the same way. It was a weird way in.
And we talked about this with the last one, and you made the brilliant observation that ultimately Final Destination is a slasher. We just don't have a villain. Like, we don't have a Jason or a Freddy or a Michael Myers. Death is our slasher. As we know very well with slasher mythology, the longer you go, the more convoluted it gets. I am the Freddy Krueger guy in this podcast. Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite film franchise, and I love it. But we've talked about this when we did our Nightmare on Elm Street series. The way they kill and bring back Freddy starts to get a little dumber and dumber in a lot of the films. Like, they really start stretching it to like, why did you bringing him back? And by the time they get to Freddy's dad, he had a kid and all. It just gets really dumb. And I know, like you fully admit, like the ways they bring back Jason and the Fridays would just get dumber and dumber. Like the way they just keep finding ways to bring him back.
Their greatest mistake was part 9, where they tried to put a storyline together. I was like, stop. No, you're really screwed up now, because that got real convoluted. It's like, look, I bought in. Jason's a zombie. Fine. Don't start coming into the mythology and the lineage and all that shit. Like, you really fucked up. And I believe those were the same producers who did Freddy's Dead and who did Dream Child and all that. They did Friday 9, and I'm like, yeah, that particular group, you guys go over here and do something else.
In Nightmare on Elm Street, they kind of peaked with part 4 when they said, and it was a line Kincaid said, it was like, if you keep going back in the dream, you're going to stir shit up. Like, you keep going in there, you're going to wake this fucker up. Like, he's a demon. Like, you just let him rest. And I love the dog pissing on the ground. And, like, that was, like, the final Freddy comeback where it was like, okay, because they're like, if you keep going back in there, you're going to wake him up. That's simple enough, and it works. Easy. And I know 4 is your favorite one. You love 4.
Love it.
But when you keep adding and keep coming with new reasons to bring him back, and it just gets dumb. And that's kind of where Final Destination, like, you have to be careful, because while I appreciate Jeffrey Reddick and the writer saying, okay, I don't want to just make another Final Destination. I want to just make it like, okay, now they're on a road. Now it's a road trip, and somebody saves them from a crash, and we're just replaying the first film. I want to introduce new mythology, and again, the Bloodworth character, new life, not rehashing, but okay, cool. That's all new mythology. It's a slight wrinkle, but it works. It's when you start, and now it's like we saved a kid, and now the kid gets blown up at the barbecue, and it's like it's all over again. You got to be careful, because, and I know, I I don't think I've gotten to the fifth one or the fourth one. There's one in this series that is just like people are just like, this is not a good Final
I think it's
Destination.
the Final Destination is what it is.
Yeah.
It's the one everyone goes, that one blows. And I'm like, well, we're going to find out.
And I think from what I hear, it's because of that. Like it just gets so ridiculous and so like not like it just goes way off guard, way out of bounds.
We're
And
talking about it with
that's
Scream too. Scream's on the verge of doing that, and I'm enjoying the new movies. I don't have a problem with how the new movies are playing out, but right when you get to Unmasking the Killer, you go, "This is a lot. This is a lot to take in."
You're jumping through a lot of hoops here to get to Sydney's lost brothers, cousins. It sounds like that line from Spaceballs where Darth Helmet is battling Lone Star and he's like, before we fight, you should know something. I'm your brother's cousins, roommates, ex-girlfriend's former boyfriend. He's like, what does that make us? Absolutely nothing. That's where Scream is going. They're like
we're getting into
I'm your cousin's brother's filmographer from his wedding 2 weddings ago. What does that make us? I have no fucking idea, but I want to kill you.
Sydney and I went on one date when she was 27 years old, and and you're just like, okay.
They're gonna get to the part where it's like she swiped left on me, but you didn't date her. No, I got so upset that she swiped left on me.
Don't even say it because it's coming, Damon. You just willed that into existence because believe me, oh God, it very much could happen.
Or Sydney's like, who are you? She's like, you don't remember swiping left on me, Sydney.
God.
Let's get into some categories, Patrick. We got a lot to talk about categories for this particular movie, Final Destination 2. And let's kick things off as we do each and every week here on the show, and that is with Best Performance. Now, I really commended the performances in the original Final Destination. I thought it was a very well-acted movie.
Mm.
I can't quite say the same with Final Destination 2. There are some standouts, but there's some rough moments. I'm not gonna call anybody out by name. I'm never gonna be cruel like that. I'm just saying there's a couple rough moments. I was watching it again and again. I haven't seen this in a few years, but I definitely have seen this one multiple times, and I was like, whew. There's some acting in this movie.
There's some acting.
So, Patrick, who stands out for you?
It's kind of weird. It's an eerie coincidence how many things we are feeling about this movie in the same way. Like so much of, and Damon and I did not pre-discuss this movie. In fact, we are so busy right now. We're basically like, what movie are we doing? Got it. I'll talk to you that day. That's how we're planning these episodes at this point. I felt very similar to you, where I was just like, boy, I was right down to the wire when I had to send you categories. I was like, I don't know who my best performance is. And I ultimately went, Damon, with Justine Machado as Isabella. And people are going, who? The pregnant woman. The woman that they have to save. And I'll tell you why. She is the one person in this movie that feels like they're not acting. Feels like a genuine person, right? She's a pregnant woman who's very pregnant, and it is like probably very close to giving birth, but she also works a job. Like she's got a delivery van. She's out there busting her ass every day. She's an everyday working woman. And then these people swoop in and like kidnap. Well, actually what happens is Officer Burke calls in his guy and he goes, just find her, tell her van is stolen and lock her up. They do that. She's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? That's my van. Why am I locked up? I'm like moments from giving birth. And then her water breaks and it becomes this whole ticking clock where you got to get her to the hospital. I just appreciated how real she was in those moments. And one other thing, Damon, I appreciate that she has maybe the worst ID photo I have ever seen in a movie. Who approved that photo? Now, Damon, I've got a lot of terrible ID photos. Like my passport looks like someone like smashed me like in a Warner Brothers cartoon, like flat. Like something looks so wrong in my IDs. This woman's ID is so heinous. And I was like, what production designer approved that photo? But I digress, Damon. I do believe that Justine gave the best performance in this movie, and she's like 15th on the call sheet.
What was her full name again? I heard, what is it, Justine?
Justine Machado.
Justine Machado, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that. Yeah, actually, my favorite part of the movie with her is when she has the baby and Kimberly and Burke rush in the room. She's like, "Who the hell are you people?" I thought
Yeah,
that was great.
she's so real. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
She's the one person in this movie that does not feel like they're in an early 2000s horror.
yeah, good comedic timing. Yeah, so I know people are going to say this is a total cop out answer, but it's not a cop out answer because it's somebody who actually put on a fairly strong performance, and that's Ali Larter coming back as Claire Rivers. Ali Larter is a talented actor. I like Ali Larter very much. She just did the new season of Landman on Paramount Plus. Can't recommend that show enough. It's a great show. I've always liked Ali Larter. So I know it's a cop out because she was great in the first one and she just carries that into the second one and she has to kind of lead a bit more in this one. But again, she's not even really the lead because she doesn't show up until 30 minutes into the movie. So I like Ali Larter and I think she does a great job continuing the story. I didn't particularly love her ending. Just again, I think the twist with her being pregnant and surviving would have been a slightly better version, but that's just me personally feeling that way. And she's the through line to, Final Destination 1, 2, and 3. But again, I digress. I thought she was strong enough. I thought she did a good job. And those movies you watch, Patrick, where there's like that one pretty talented actor and the rest of the cast is a little rough and you're like, man, I wonder if it was tough going to work those days. I'm not gonna sit there and say Ali Larter is like the Oscar-winning greatest actors of all time, but I really enjoy her work. I wonder if there's days where she's like, "Man, it's a long day at work here today."
We should get her on the podcast and be like, just tell us which day was the hardest. Like, just you don't have to say who or what. Just tell us what movie gave you the hardest day, and she'd be like, Final Destination 2. What was that? You heard me.
Yeah. Again, I'm just saying, like, I think what she brings to the film, she does a good job, and she's just a good actor in general. And so, yes, maybe it's a cop out because she's the one consistent person in this movie, besides the great Tony Todd.
I thought your cop out answer was going to be Tony Todd, and I was like, Damon, he's in the movie for 5 minutes.
I wouldn't have gone that. I wouldn't have gone. And
I almost chose him.
we have a category coming up, and
yes, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it. I actually have maybe a bit of a controversial take.
Ooh, okay, good. Let's get to that soon.
Yeah, let's get to that here in just a minute. Let's move on to our next category, and that is MVP. Our Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, when it comes to Final Destination 2, who gets your MVP?
Damon, my MVP goes to the writers. This is more of a Damon Martin type pick, but I could not deny that the writing in this movie, despite our challenges to some of its logic, did actually present a newer way in, something new and fresh that did not feel like a straight rehash of the first movie. I really had to give them credit for that. I was like, they actually added to the lore. They created more design. They created new wrinkles for how death worked and how death could be defeated. I appreciated that stuff. And I thought that was actually really important to this movie, which again, I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about things we didn't like about this movie. It's an enjoyable watch because it's constantly trying to subvert us. Did it succeed perfectly? No, but the effort is there and it's clear and it makes for a breezy and fun watch.
Is it Clear Rivers? No, I'm just joking.
It's not Clear Rivers. It might be Muddy Waters.
Yes, and to be clear, like when we said earlier about like some of the story, gets a little convoluted, and we have kind of an issue at the ending. The writing is still strong, and honestly, it's one of those things where it feels like they just tweaked it too much. Like they actually had a really strong script. They just like, well, hold on, we got to keep adding, we got to keep tweaking and keep changing, and that's really what we had the problem with. It's not the plot or the addition to the mythology. It's just they kept going a little too far. It's like the movie you watch that should have been an hour and 35 minutes, and it goes for an hour and 50 minutes, and you're like, did we really need that? It's like the way you felt about Terrifier 2. Like, you like Terrifier 2, but did it need to be 2 hours and 15 minutes? Probably not. I think they're like, well, we got to keep adding. And it's like, slow down. You had a really strong idea. You had a really good script. let's just, reel it back in a little bit. And again, that's really my only issue is that the script is great, the writing is great, the plot, the mythology is all great. I'm for it. They just went a little too far. It's like they had 12 perfect tracks for an album. They decided to add that 13th that just didn't need to be there. So I had to dig deep for my no. When I say dig deep, it wasn't like, oh, I have no pick here. I wanted to make sure and get the right person.
Gotcha.
For my pick, and I had to do some digging here. So and again, to be fair, I'm giving it to one person, but it's really a company. My MVP is Jason Crosby, who is the CG supervisor at a company called Digital Dimension. They were responsible for all the effects in this movie, in particular that opening crash scene. And I read an interview with him talking about that. They were talking about how they did it, and they showed you can actually go online and you can see there's green screen footage of like some of the crash and the 3D that they made of the log and things like that. But Jason Crosby was the supervisor, so I'm giving him the credit, but it's really Digital Dimension. And the reason I say that, if you go back and watch a lot of early 2000s films when they just started using CG, some of it looks real bad. I mean, really bad. Now, if you've listened to the show for more than 10 episodes, we are practical effects guys. I will always choose practical effects over CG where it's possible, but there are just some instances, like a truck or like a log flying through a fucking person in a car. You're not going to pull that off with practical effects, and it's probably not going to look right. You're going to have to use some digital effects in there. The fact that this movie still looks as good as it does, and yeah, there's some dicey moments with some fire that looks a little out there, but this movie actually looks really good for a 2003 movie with the digital effects. So Jason Crosby, Digital Dimensions, man, you get a standing ovation for me because this still holds up pretty well for a movie that's over 20 years old.
I'm really glad you brought this up because I think I mentioned a little bit when I was talking about the beginning of this movie. For 2003, it looks damn good. You really got to strain to see the seams, if that makes any sense, to really see the digital outline, if you will. And there's kind of a phenomenon going around where, like, in the cinephile community, where people are now posting CG from the early 2000s, and they're going, why is it so much better than what's in Marvel movies now? Like, what's going on? Where, like, the attempt back then was to make it look like it was not fake. They wanted you to think that what you were seeing was happening in the space. Now we seem to be in this mode, and maybe it's just a superhero like bloat going like, oh no, everything can look cartoonish and different and like completely like divorced from reality. And now we just accept that because everything needs to be bigger and brighter and badder, But it's like, no, the CG from the early 2000s, and I'll give it from like 2015 back, on movies that were really giving a shit. And this movie's budget's only $26 million. Marvel movies are literally 10 times that much money. For a $26 million movie in 2003, they did a damn good job with the CG. It's really close. I mean, there's moments, of course. It's not perfect. But like Freddy versus Jason was just a few years earlier or later. I don't remember.
I want to say it was a few years earlier. I think I have to look it up.
I'm not 100%. I don't 100% remember, but I will say this: the CG in that does not hold up, and I guarantee you that.
Funny enough, Freddy vs. Jason was also 2003, same year as this.
There you go. And believe me, I think they put a little bit more money into that movie. I'm just guessing because it was a huge franchise movie that they knew was going to do very well, and it did. The CG in that movie does not hold up at all. Like, I love that movie to the ends of the earth. I cannot defend the CG in that movie. It looks like crap. But when the time is taken, you get stuff like that. And I was impressed. I was like, boy, that log scene still looks good. And like, how is that even possible? So it's a great pick because I was thinking about that when I was watching this movie.
Yeah, and if you just look it up, Digital Dimension, Jason Crosby, Final Destination 2, there's more than one article out there, but they actually show some of the green screen of the log of the guy getting lopped in pieces by the barbed wire. and you see how they created it, and it's like, damn, this is pretty impressive. And to your point about the Marvel movie thing, I wonder, and I know this is getting off topic, but I'm being serious when I say this. Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame are like the best of the best of Marvel in terms of effects. Like those movies,
Yes.
unbelievable, like unbelievable. And Avengers Endgame made over, like, it was the biggest film of all time until James Cameron's like, I got to re-release Avatar, which I don't even like Avatar, for being honest. I can't be number two. It was a billion dollar movie and made all the money, but then, and it obviously made a huge profit for Disney. But then obviously they start looking at the cast. Like, we got to pay Scarlett Johansson, we got to pay Sebastian Stan, we got to pay Chris Evans, we got to pay Chris Hemsworth. When it all comes down, I seriously wonder when it all came down to, like, well, if we cheapen up here, but we still got Paul Rudd and we still got this, we still got that, can we cheapen on the CGI so we can make more money? I really think it's starting to come down to that, because it's not like the good people aren't out there who can do digital effects. I just wonder if they're just like, we're not going to pay for it because we can make a bigger profit margin if we don't have, like, we still got to have Ryan Reynolds and we can't not have Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, but we can cheapen up the digital effects and save money.
And they did.
And
Wolverine Deadpool's CG looks rough.
And I can't help but wonder if seriously that's not the reason, because when you watch Infinity War and Endgame, those are beautiful films as far as like the effects go, digital effects, CGI, all of it. I wonder if that's like, well, we can't not pay Ryan Reynolds, and as more movies, and if you know anything about Hollywood, the more movies you make, the more you get paid. So now they're like, we got $40 million on the line for Ryan Reynolds, we got $50 million on the line for Hugh Jackman. We got to make our money somewhere. We don't really need all these digital effects, do we? No, we're good. I just wonder if that's not the case.
That might be it. I don't know. It's really hard to say, but in this instance for Final Destination 2, I think it's pretty damn good contextually speaking.
And judging, this sounds so mean, and judging by some of the acting performances, they shied away from paying the actors, and they decided to put the money into the digital.
Yeah, they went the other direction. They said, we need to spend our money on the production design instead of the acting.
That's
okay,
so
no, that's moving. We're moving on. That was absolutely rude.
That was
so rude of us.
It was funny, though. Admit it was funny.
I don't mean that at
all. Patrick, this next category, who's the better half man? And would you like to explain this category? Because I love this category.
The half man in story terms is a person who has already gone through this or has prior knowledge of the monster in your movie. Any movie, even a non-horror movie, you can argue there's a monster in it of some sort, right? You know, even Home Alone, like the monster in the movie is the two robbers, the wet bandits. They're the monster in the movie, so it doesn't have to be a monster. In this case, it is a literal monster. It's death coming for people. And we have not one, but two half men in this movie, and I would argue three, because they're at the very beginning in the rolling credits. In the beginning, there's a guy on TV who claims to understand death's design. So there's actually three, but this guy's like a throwaway one that they put in the credits. The two half men in this movie are Bloodworth, who we met in the first movie, and somehow, because he's a mortician, he knows exactly how death comes for you. Like, I love the conceit of that. It's so old school Hollywood to just be like, yeah, the mortician knows about death. We'll go to him and get the answers. But the other half man is Clear. And we've even been through this before with Clear. We watched Clear get through and beat Death's design. So she's a half man in this movie. In fact, she's the half man that Kim seeks out. She's like, well, I know someone who went through this. Let me go and find that person. Damon, my question to you is, who's the better half man? Is it Bloodworth, who came with a very simple answer, which was new life will stop Death's design? Or was it Clear, who actually had been through the battle and kind of helped this team along?
Okay, here's my controversial take. If you watch this movie from start to finish, and then you ask this question, which is what we're doing, the only answer is Clear Rivers. And the reason I say that is because ultimately Bloodworth's advice doesn't mean shit. I mean, I'm just saying, like, when you think about it, I'm not going to rehash what we said earlier about the whole, like, they keep adding and the Isabella thing, right. Then it's Kimberly. by the time you reach the Kimberly thing, like, oh, she was the new life. Not really, because it didn't matter, because the cop saved someone else, and now we're all back in it, just like the original one, where we thought it was over, 6 months had passed, they all survived, and then they go to Paris and people are still dying. It's the same thing here. Really, the new life didn't do dick. So Bloodworth's inclusion is really just, hey, we love Tony Todd, which I understand that.
Yes.
Let's bring him back. He's creepy. He's cool. He's awesome. People love him as Candyman. He's a cool character, and he had that great line, that's one Mac Daddy you don't fuck with in the original. We got to bring him back. Because really, his mythology doesn't do anything in this movie. When you really get down to the nitty-gritty of how it ends, his advice was really wrong. It didn't matter. So I say it's Clear, because at least Clear had the original idea of, you stop a person from dying and that skips them and moves on. And so it keeps rolling. Now, do you ever really get saved? Can you ever really break the pattern? Can you ever get away from it? Clearly not. But she at least knows that you can delay it. She knows that much. You can delay it. And so her input is at least valuable to that part of the story, because ultimately Bloodworth, as much as I love Tony Todd, hail to you, we all miss you, you're sadly no longer with us. I'm glad they brought him back. I just wish they had given him something that actually mattered, because really it didn't. His advice didn't do anything.
Damon, the only reason I disagree with that is because his advice did mean something. It just like the writers ignored his advice. Like his advice was fine. And his advice actually still stands, which is new life will. He could have been a little more specific. But truth be told is he gives you the way to break the pattern. And so I would argue it wasn't his fault. But the things got convoluted. But he gives you the key to stopping Death's Design, which is a new life has to spring from it.
If you go to our ending, it does.
Yes.
His part matters. But the fact that it doesn't matter. So that's why I'm saying, like, the way they ended the movie, they just completely ignored what he did. So he doesn't really matter.
But it doesn't matter because Burke saved somebody's life during that design. Like, and if you would have followed everything and Burke wouldn't have messed with the design, which was the little farm boy who was supposed to get plowed over. If that hadn't happened, Tony Todd's message is correct, but you can't be perfect. You can't be, right? You know, you're going to mess up along the way. Of course, you're going to save someone from being run over. Why wouldn't you? So you're going to mess with Death's Design. He told you that a long time ago. You mess with Death's Design, he's a bad motherfucker. He's a bad Mac Daddy. He's coming back for you. Don't worry about it. So he gave you all the info, and he does it, by the way, Damon, he does it in a total of 10 minutes over 2 movies. You have all the information you need. So that's why I put him in as my favorite, half man in this movie. But yes, of course, David, the movie gets a little convoluted. We did go through that already. Let's just say, may the best half man win.
And as I said, I love Tony Todd. I love that part, but the writers
absolutely
just, again, they added that 13th track to the album that just didn't need to be there. We didn't need that bonus track. Otherwise, Tony Todd's part makes sense. So that's why I say, like, ultimately, he doesn't matter because you just completely, like, subverted what he actually said. So that's why I said, I'm not saying I love Tony Todd. I love him being.
Listen, it's just for fun.
Yeah. Patrick, next category, of course, this is Final Destination. And I do want to get a little bit of detail with these as far as we're going to talk about Best Death. That's our next category. But I also want to mention as we talk about Best Death, because again, this is where Final Destination starts. And it started in the first one as well, where the deaths start to get a little too elaborate. And I say that with the first death after the car crash, where the kid's in his apartment, where the windows close and you can't open them, and like it gets a little wild, like all the series of events, like him getting his hand stuck in the drain or in the garbage disposal, the food catches fire, then the towel it's like, I understand, and I get it. You started with Todd. Todd had a bit of a, his whole thing was a little bit out there, and Val Lewton, the teacher, was a little out there, but I think that's where the Final Destination movies start getting a little crazier. People are like, this is getting kind of stupid. Like, you you're setting up like the most elaborate domino ever to get to the point of someone killing themselves in these movies. I think it kind of starts a little bit crazy here, but there are still some really cool death scenes here.
Damon, my favorite is, I think, probably the most memorable kill in the entire franchise. And I'll have another one. I have another like honorable mention, but you cannot talk about Final Destination 2 without talking about the log kill. I was so shocked and bowled over when I saw this kill for the first time. I remember it so distinctly. I go, that's one of the most disgusting, horrifying kills I've ever seen. And I think what really tapped into it, and we've talked about this, or we teased this last time we talked with Chuck, that created a fear amongst people of a certain age. If you saw this movie during that timeline, and then you ever got on the road and you were behind a truck that was hauling something like logs or rebar or something that could detach loose and fly through your windshield and turn you into lunch meat, it happened. It started in this movie. So I could not bring that up, because to me, that is the most influential thing that has come out of all the Final Destination movies. There were people that were already afraid of flying. There were people that were already afraid of, this thing and that, getting run over and all that stuff. Nobody was really talking about the fear of having a log go through your windshield and turn you into jelly.
That's the answer. So we're going to talk about a couple others. That is the answer. When that log flies through Officer Burke and comes out on the other end, and you just see the mashed goo that's left of him on the end of the log, it is so visceral and so shocking, and so it is a full-on holy shit moment. And yes, you're absolutely right. If you drive behind a truck now and they got pipes or logs or anything that looks like it could fall out, you are switching lanes. Mm-hmm. Instinctively, if you've seen this movie. I do it. I fully admit I do it. I'm like,
it's changed a generation of people, like 100%.
So that is the answer. And I watched it again. That opening sequence, as I said, as much as I love the original, this one is better. This opening sequence, the entire series of events. The log is the most memorable, but just the whole thing is just crazy. It's just like the whole sequence of events is crazy and amazing. But that moment of the look on Burke's face and the log just going through him, not killing him, through him and killing him, it's unbelievable. It's the best. It's the best moment in this film and when I say by a wide margin, I'm not saying I don't like anything else. I love this movie.
Right.
I like this movie a lot. That you can't get that out of your head.
It's one of the most influential kills in horror, period. I mean, think about it. It really is.
So now other kills, and I'm going to go with my other kill that I really liked, and I'm sure you're going to come up with another one as well, but I mentioned earlier when I talked about the impressive CG in this movie for a movie that's 20 plus years old, it's the barbed wire scene. When the barbed wire goes slicing through him and he just slices into 3 different pieces. Again, for 2003 effects, it's pretty damn good. And it's just so shocking that he just gets sliced into 3 parts and you see him like slide apart. It's such a great and creative kill, and I love that kill. And just the look on that guy's face and the way his body just slides in different directions is just awesome.
It's a beautiful kill, man. It's another one of those kills where you're just like, holy shit. Like it genuinely surprises you. My honorable mention goes to the airbag kill, which I loved. Oh, Damon. And I believe the character, if I'm not mistaken, was Nora. If I'm not mistaken.
No, is that Kat? Is that her name?
Or you know what? Maybe it was Kat. Let me see.
It was.
Yeah, it was Kat.
It was Kat.
It was Kat. It was Kat. And so Kat is stuck in this van. They got into an accident in the field, so she's pinned in by this big piece of wood, and they're bringing in the jaws of life to get her out. And mind you, she has dodged so many things. She's dodged this sharp pipe that nearly pierced her head. She's dodged the log that went through the door that nearly severed her in half and all this stuff. So you're like, wow, she's tied in there. And you're just like, okay, like she's I guess she's going to get out. She somehow managed to escape all these weird things. And then the firefighters come in with the jaws of life. They're being too rough with the door, and she's like, "Hey, can you like take it easy a little bit?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, I'll put this on easy mode or whatever, on gentle." He hits the thing, shakes the car, and the fucking airbag slams her face back into the sharp shard of a pipe behind her and totally impales her head. And I was like, fuck, I totally forgot that happened. And it's so subversive, which if there's any adjective I could use about this movie, it's subversive. That was a fantastic subversive kill.
And I think my point to those two kills in particular, and again, yeah, they're illogical because you'd hope that, like, when you get in a freaking car accident, the airbag should have already gone off. But simpler is better. And those are shocking moments. Like when the airbag goes off and then the airbag deflates and you see she's been impaled, you're like, oh shit. When the barbed wire gets unsnapped and it goes and literally cuts through that guy, you don't necessarily see it coming. It's the really, really like convoluted ways they kill people, like the guy in the apartment, where it gets a little ridiculous, where you're like, he has to do this, the microwave has to explode because you don't see the magnet fall into his food, and like it's just, and the best way they did it in this movie that I really enjoy is the kid who's in the dentist's office, because when he's in the dentist's office, you're like, oh, he's gonna die 16 different ways. You see the water leaking, you see the thing fall into his mouth, the bird comes into the office, and you're like, oh, okay, they're setting it up to be that kind. That doesn't happen. They save him. Now, the jackass kid goes out and scares pigeons, and the plane of glass comes out and squashes it, which is another great death. But when you start getting like the elevator with the hook and the elevator, it gets a little too much. Where you're just like, this is. I understand it's a movie, and you gotta just you gotta suspend disbelief. But still, you get a little, like talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 3, like my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street 3, like there's only so many ways you can kill people with a glove and be Freddy. And Nightmare on Elm Street 3, when he says, welcome to prime time, bitch, and he slams her into the TV, kind of cool. Now when you get to Freddy's Dead, part 6, and he's using a fucking Nintendo controller, and like you're like, oh my God, you've run out of ideas. Just stop. You've run out of ideas. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, simple is better.
Simple is better, Damon. But ultimately, I think there's a couple of really awesome kills in there. And the funny thing about that glass kill, where the kid gets smashed by the glass because he's scaring the pigeons, that's kind of Kim's fault. If she hadn't have said the pigeons, he's like, oh, pigeons, cool, I'll go screw with them. Like, it was all her fault anyway. I just love that part of it. But that was another great kill. It's just super graphic, super cool. There's still good kills in here. Some are a little more far-fetched than others.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's where it just kind of separates a little bit more for me there. Patrick, our last category, as we said, we are not doing Can We Survive This Horror Film? Because clearly you can't survive these horror films. It's like we had to, when we did the Alien franchise, we had to stop asking that question. We're like, because you go against the xenomorphs, you're gonna die. No one really makes it out of these movies alive. So, and we're obviously not doing we're not doing sequel or Leave It Alone or whatever, because we're in the middle of a franchise. We know there are plenty.
We know there's sequels.
Yeah. So our last category, of course, is it scary? And we kind of, in the last one with Final Destination, the original, we kind of said, like, it's not really a scary movie. It's a great movie. It's a thrilling movie, but it's not really scary. Did anything change in Final Destination 2?
I think it's more of the same, but in a great way. And again, and something that we've been saying this entire podcast is it's subversive. It's a very subversive movie. You think it's going this way, it goes that way. I love that. And to me, that adds to the thrill. That actually ups the thrill level for me. The thrill of the first one is like, oh, this is a unique and new premise. The second one doesn't have anything unique or new about it, so now it needs to keep tricking you, which this movie does. And I think that subversiveness lends itself to sort of a shock factor. And you even talk about the log and the pile up in the beginning, rather shocking, rather dreadful. This, I would argue, is slightly scarier on the spectrum, right? We know that we're kind of over in the thrill side of the scary spectrum. I think this ticked its box just a little bit closer to the scary side on this one because of the subversiveness and because of those kills that were just like, holy shit, I didn't see that coming. I think these kills were a little more hardcore, so I'm going to tick it just a little bit over to a slightly more scary than Final Destination 1.
And again, we don't discuss this beforehand, but I totally agree. I think this is a little more visceral. This is not scary in that particular sense. It's the same way you watch a great action movie. You watch like Fast and the Furious, and you watch a great car race, and your adrenaline's pumping. It's very thrilling. For a horror movie, that's what Final Destination 2 does. It just amps it up a little bit more. It's a little bit more testosterone, a little bit more adrenaline pumping through your veins because it's just a little bit more thrilling, things you don't quite see coming. The shocking kills are a little more shocking in this movie because, you kind of boil it down to a couple of key moments in the first one. This one, there's like 10 where he's like, oh, Jesus Christ. And again, like I said, I feel like they went a little too far because they're like, we got to add one more. But other than that, this is a more thrilling movie, and that's, as you said, that's the spectrum we're working on here. This is not a traditional scary film. You're not going to jump out of your seats. You're not going to need to turn the lights off at night when you go to bed watching this movie. But you will have thrilling moments.
But you will be scared to drive behind a truck with logs for the rest of your life. I mean, come on. This movie did that.
Yeah, it really did. So, yeah, it's more thrilling. So, is it scary? Not in the traditional sense of, is it scary? No. Is it thrilling? It absolutely is. And I would say, again, the first one, it's like, it's an adrenaline rush. This one is full on, like, heart pumping adrenaline rush. Like, they really did ratchet it up and did a great job with that. And that's kind of what a sequel's supposed to do.
Yeah, I think it succeeded,
Yeah. So, that is Final Destination 2. Now, as we continue our Final Destination discourse, and we go through the entire series, here's our big surprise. We had the honor, a little while ago, to sit down and talk to the man responsible for creating this entire franchise. Jeffrey Reddick, the man who wrote the original Final Destination script and came up with the idea and the story for Final Destination 2 as well, sat down and spent about 45 minutes with me and Patrick and just told some great stories, talked about coming up with the ideas. We talked about the Devon Sawa of it all, his ideas for the second film that didn't get made or didn't end up in the movie, the first film. We go through everything, so stay tuned. That's going to be a very special extra episode of the podcast coming up, our interview with Jeffrey Reddick. It was a really cool conversation, and we set some surprises for this franchise review. You couldn't get bigger or better than the guy who actually created the franchise.
Yeah, welcome. It's a little bonus episode. It's not going to cost you any extra money. You don't have to go to a Patreon or anything to get it. We got you a bonus episode with the guy who created the Final Destination franchise. Great guy, lovely talk, lovely discussion. So stay tuned because that's coming out in the near future.
Absolutely. And as we said, we're going to continue with the Final Destination franchise. I think we're going to get into some interesting times now because we're getting into the films that neither one of us have really, like, again, I know I've seen parts of these next three or whatever they are, but I don't have great memory. I know there's one with a roller coaster.
That's all I know.
That might be about the extent of what I can remember. So these next few are going to be pretty interesting. This is not even like Alien, where I was like, oh God, I saw Alien Resurrection once and it was bad. Now I have to watch it again. Or Prometheus. These I can't really remember. So those will be a fresh experience. It'll be interesting. And obviously we're going to be leading, of course, into Final Destination Bloodlines, which comes out in May. So I don't know if we'll get through every film by then. We'll try. Always depends on release dates and things like that. But we appreciate everyone that listens to our entire franchise review. As always, if you want to find us, you can find us on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Over on our YouTube channel, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. As I always say, even if you don't listen or watch us on YouTube, please subscribe. It does make a huge difference for us in terms of search results and things like that, so we would really appreciate that. And also you can find us over on our website, rewindofTheLivingDead.com, so check us out over there. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up on email anytime, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rot. livingdead@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys in the email, and you can also find us on social media on our own personal. You can find the Rewind of Living Dead on all social media platforms, Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us messages there. We will always try to reply and get back to you, or even add it to the show if we can. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace, Mac Daddy.